Hey, how you doing? I suppose you're wondering why I'm playing the horn. Because we're in Hoorn, silly.
I'm gonna travel the world. I'm gonna go where the Dutch have been, and I'm gonna share it with you, my friends. Let's go Dutch. Let's go Dutch. Let's go Dutch.
We'll stroll around one of Holland's prettiest market squares, visit the West Friesland Museum, and gaze upon a harbor which launched 1,000 ships to the Spice Islands. So put on your clogs and let's go Dutch! Just 40 minutes by train from Amsterdam, Hoorn is the capital of the West Friesland part of Noord Holland province. Cape Hoorn, that's the treacherous southern point of South America. Mariners for centuries feared rounding this point, but when the Panama Canal opened in 1914, they said bye-bye forever. Why am I telling you this? Because the Dutchman that named Cape Hoorn named it after his hometown, Hoorn. Hoorn received a city charter in 1357 from the Count of Holland, Willem V.
Hoorn, which means hoek van de dijk, the corner of the sea dike, was originally a major seaport. Just like Amsterdam, the Dutch East India Company had a chamber in Hoorn. In Dutch, it's the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, or VOC for short. Keep an eye out for VOC on buildings.
We're going to start our trip through Hoorn at the Rode Steen. In most Dutch towns, the Markt is the biggest and main square. Here in Hoorn, it's the Rode Steen, which means red stone. The name actually comes from the executions held in the square back in medieval days. The Rode Steen is dominated by the West Friesland Museum and the Wacht, and keeping an eye out is this guy. Hometown boy Jan Pieterzoon Koen. He was the Governor General of the VOC and established a trading factory in Jakarta, Indonesia back in 1619. While Jan was a celebrated hero, he was pretty ruthless in his building of the Batavian trading factories. Just want to throw that out there. The VOC formed in 1602, and they were essentially the merging of smaller merchant companies into one large, powerful corporation. Part of the VOC charter was establishing and protecting trading posts. Jan, I want to thank you for bringing the Indonesian race topper back to Holland. Oh, if you haven't had the Indonesian race topper yet, you must. You must. Now over in this corner of the Rode Steen, we have the Wacht, the Way House. This Wacht was built in 1609. One of the privileges that came with the city charter was the ability to charge taxes on goods, and so a Way House was important to have for goods passing through. As the Dutch maritime supremacy started to wane in the late 17th century, trade became more important. Kaas, or cheese as we call it, was coming into the Way House, and a weekly Kaasmarkt started, which to this day happens on Wednesdays. There is now a cafe in the Wacht, and the old tools of the trade are on display as a mini-museum. The star attraction of Hoorn is the West Friesland Museum. Can anyone guess which building it's probably in?
How about that one?
That one indeed. Willem, tell us about that building.
This fine gabled building dates back to 1632 and was the Staten College, gekameraden van West Friesland in het Noorderkwartier. What that means is that the representatives of the 7 member cities of West Friesland met in this building.
The Staatswappen of those 7 member cities are represented on the facade, starting with Medemblik, Edam, Hoorn, Alkmaar, Enkhuizen, Monnikendam, and Purmerend. In the center is the coat of arms of West Friesland, and above that is the Wapen van Oranje-Nassau. The House of Orange is the foundation of the Dutch kingdom, which is why orange is the national color.
Step inside, and it's still 1602. Here you're greeted by the bigwigs of the VOC. In a corner sits the spices brought back from the Asian trading factories. You can't talk about Holland's golden age without talking about the VOC. The Dutch East India Company were largely responsible for the wealth pouring into Holland. The West Fries Museum is a proud reminder that Hoorn was a VOC member, and their seafaring pass is on display. From the ships they sailed to their naval heroes. Walking through the museum is a walk through 17th century Hoorn. The VOC ushered in the Golden Age, and each room you step through is a portrait of that time period. On display are the items they collected. Curiosities of exotic cultures. One of the great pleasures of Europe is strolling around the old towns and exploring. Hoorn is of no exception. You can either wander on your own or stop in at the tourist office and pick up a Staatswandeling cart. We're going to head to the harbor area first. The harbor plays an important part in the story of Hoorn. After all, it was a major port, launching the VOC and the Dutch into history. Now, speaking of story, there's a children's story called The Scheepjongens van Bontekoe. Willem's a storyteller. Let's have him tell us a story.
These youngins were shipboys on the Hoorn, a VOC ship skippered by Hoorn native Willem Bontekoe. He set out for the East Indies in 1618, and his wild adventures were notated in his journal and published in 1646. The children's book, The Scheepjongens van Bontekoe, written in 1924, was based on that journal.
Guarding the harbor is the Hoofdtoren, the main tower. Dating from 1532, the tower was originally part of the defensive wall, built in 1508. It's quite interesting. Semicircular on the seaside, and a facade on the street side. A whaling company took over the tower in 1614, the Noordse Compagnie van Spitsbergen. At that time, there was no bell tower. That came in 1651. The wooden landing next to the Hoofdtoren was actually here before the tower, dating all the way back to 1464.
If Hoorn has a classic view, this is it. The harbor with the old gable merchants' houses.
Hey, my friends here tell me that just a few houses down on Veermanskade is the geboortehuis van Willem Bantekoe.
The geboortehuis van Willem Bantekoe. That means this is where he was born, back in 1587.
Here's a little tidbit about Bantekoe. He only made one voyage for the VOC, so it must have been quite an adventure for it to be turned into a children's book.
At the tip of Hoorn's harbor, at the Varnd Erfgoed Maritime Museum, we find a historical ship of great importance to America, the Halve Maan. This is a replica of Henry Hudson's ship, the Half Moon, which crossed the Atlantic and sailed into history. New York City had its foundation as New Amsterdam, and it all started on September 9th, 1609, when Hudson arrived in Manhattan Harbor. On 9/11, 1609, the Halve Maan sailed further north along the river to where the Dutch would later establish Fort Oranje. We know it today as Albany. Now, if you sailed into town from the east, you came through this gate, the Oosterpoort. The gate was built in 1578 as part of the defensive wall. The little house on top was added in 1601. Originally, you proceeded over a wooden bridge, but it was replaced in 1763 with this stone bridge. Hoorn is one of those compact little Dutch towns that offers a little for everyone. Perhaps you're the type that loves strolling through quaint neighborhoods with your loved one, or biking down peaceful canals, over little Dutch bridges, and past houses dating back to the Golden Age.
Speaking of Golden Age, this house was the meeting place of the Dutch West India Company back in 1784. They were a later branch of the East India Company and spread the Dutch ties to the Caribbean and the Americas.
Keep an eye out for gable stones, which were medieval house address markings. These are very typical of the types of gable stones found throughout Nederland. However, in the case of the Basuchhausen, it's something entirely different.
These are the Basuchhausen. The gable stones depict a famous sea battle from 1573 on the Zuiderzee.
The battle was fought right off the port of Hoorn. The start of Dutch independence came about from a ragtag pirate fleet of revolting Dutch nobles known as Vadergulzen, the Sea Beggars. They defeated the much larger and better equipped Spanish fleet headed by Admiral Bossu, hence the name, the Bossuhausen.
This is the Statenlogement. Basically, this was a house for the West Friesland council members.
Once again, take time to admire the detailed work of this 1618 facade. This Renaissance gable sits on the foundations of a convent from 1435. It became the Stadthaus in 1796.
Around the corner on Muntstraat, we just happened to find the Oostindische House, the Hoorn chamber of the VOC.
The representatives of the Dutch East India Company met here. Plans were drawn up, maps studied, crews assembled, and off to the Far East they sailed.
Now, speaking of sailing, did you notice that house we sailed by just before the Statenlogement? Come, let's go back and have a look. What do you think? A seaman lived there? A wealthy one at that.
Flanked by whales and steeped in mythology, Baroque adornments like this were the perks of the Golden Age. Along with the merchant fleet of the East and West India Companies, Hoorn was also a major fishing port and trading hub, and sprinkled throughout town are storage houses known as Packhausen.
Some of the Packhausen are just simple warehouses. Others, like these crickety step gables, look like they've heard many a tale of the sea from salty old sailors.
We're following Kerkstraat north from the Rotestein, which will take us to the Grote Kerk. Sitting on the edge of the Kerkplein is our first stop, the Boterhal.
This stately old building is the St. Jan's Gasthuis, also known as the Boterhal. In 1563, it was a hospital ward of the St. Jan's Hospital. In the late 1800s, it was used as storage for the militia. In 1922, it became a storage for eggs and butter, and that's why it's known as the Boterhal, the Butter Hall.
On the other side of the Kerkplein is the Admiraliteit Sportje.
This gate is from 1607, and it led to the West Friesland Admiralty Building. Up on top of the gate is their coat of arms. Later on, the building became a hospital run by the St. Agnes Convent. Right next door is the Oude Vrouwenhuis, which is a home for old women. Looking at this gable stone, it's clear this packhouse belonged to the VOC. In fact, the VOC bought this warehouse in 1670 when they outgrew their first one.
Just think, spices and exotic goods from the Asian trading factories were being stored right there.
This pretty canal is called Monnikenveld. There was a field here used by the monks from the St. Petershof cloister. The Monnikenveld boasts having Hoorn's oldest house from 1593. At the end of the canal is the Klaas Stapelhoufsje, which was founded as a home for women in 1682.
1615.
1615?
Yeah, 1615.
Do tell us what happened back then.
That's when the builder of that unusual house told the church when they asked,
When will our parish house be finished?
1615.
It does a pretty good job at blowing its own horn, from its seafaring past to the emergence of the semi-autonomous West Friesland government. And yet, this city still manages to be quaint and historical at the same time. But that's all the time we have. I hope you've enjoyed our trek through Hoorn. I'm Veronica Lewis. Join us again next time on Let's Go Dutch as we explore more of Holland and beyond. Tot ziens!